Now, I just want to start off by saying that this story didn't happen to me, but my mother when she was in her 20s, and I am only just finding out about this story. One night a few decades ago, my mother was out of town in a nightclub with her best friend Mary. My mum and Mary were enjoying themselves, dancing, etc. Though the night my mum found herself dancing with this one guy at first. He was fun and my mum really enjoyed dancing with him. As the night progressed, however, he became a lot more annoying. He insisted that my mum leave with him, to which my mum declined. He was persistent and my mum had enough. She basically told him to screw off. She had not seen him for the rest of the night. My mum had stayed in this town for another day with Mary, and they decided they would be leaving to go home during the evening. As they were ready to go home, and by the way, the drive was about 45 minutes to an hour away, they picked up this guy they've known for a while. Everyone knew his name. I'll just call him John for this. He was also known as being a typical drunk, but wasn't a bad person. He was also a big guy. He lived in the same town as my mum and Mary, so he hitched a ride with them home. About 20 minutes into the drive, my mum, being the driver, notices that she's being followed by a police car. I don't remember if she told me if it was an actual police car or an undercover, but either way. Expecting to be pulled over, she slows down and sure enough, the police turns its lights on and my mum pulls over. Now, my mum is a very sassy person. She immediately got out of the car. Probably not the best thing to do when pulled over, but she was young and naive. The cop got out of the car and immediately told my mum to get back into the car. Though my mum immediately recognises that this is the annoying guy from the club. My mum, being herself, told him no. She says, "I'm exercising my legs." She started doing jumping jacks. The guy then puts his hand on his holster as if he was about to shoot or something. He then yells at her to get back in the car. My mum says, "Absolutely not, I remember you. You're just mad that I wouldn't leave the club with you. You had no reason to pull me over. You're ugly." She had a few more choice words for him. Mary, in the passenger seat still, yells at my mum, telling her just to get back in the car. John was asleep in the back seat and awakens during the commotion. John was a really big guy. When the cop notices there was someone in the back, he shines his flashlight and sees John. My mum was already expecting to be arrested for being disorderly. Then my mum said the weirdest thing happened. The cop immediately backs up and goes back into his car and speeds away. Now, up until that point, my mum thought that this guy was a real cop that just wanted to give her a ticket since she rejected him. But after he immediately left, she decides to call the department to ask if they have anyone by the name of, I'll just call him Mark, with his badge number. After calling several towns with everyone saying they don't have such a person working for them, she, Mary and John were asked to come in and to then help identify this guy. A week passes and he's nowhere to be found. Until Mary spots him at a different club, my mum decides to stay home, spooked by the whole incident the week prior. Mary sees him and immediately calls my mum. They're both freaking out at this point. My mum calls the police right then and gives them the location. State troopers and police from several other towns arrive and get this guy. They then raid his house and find tons of police officer paraphernalia, illegal weapons and pictures of several women in his house. He's acquired many charges including an impersonation of a police officer and something along the lines of intimidation with a weapon. He ended up being put in jail for several years. It's crazy thinking of what he was planning to do to my mum if she had just complied or if John wasn't there in the back seat. He had a set of cuffs in the car. You occasionally hear these stories of someone impersonating a police officer to do malicious things, but I never thought that would happen to me or anyone that I knew. It's crazy she waited until now to tell me. I've worked at the same grocery store for the last 4.5 years of my life. Of course, I've seen some pretty crazy people come in and whatnot, but this absolutely takes care for me. It was a regular work shift for me as a cashier, with me working short amounts of time as I was only 16. I tend to keep to the same schedule because I liked the days that I was working on and it really kept me on the ball being in school and all. Since I worked during the days on weekends, I would usually see the same few regulars, which was not uncommon for me at all. One customer usually stood out to me though. I had never caught his name, but it was this older man. He was in his late 60s, I'd say. This customer would come in to my register lane every single week on the same day around the same time. Not only that, but he would also buy the exact same groceries every week, and he would literally always make me bag them for his liking. Honestly, I would never even have thought twice about this old man because he just seemed very friendly, and who was I to think otherwise? Well, I was wrong. This one specific shift is where things were normal, then instantly went south. I was on my register and I see him walking over, as per usual, setting things on the belt. We just had the normal conversation and whatnot. Then he asked me when I got on my break. Not only did I really not know what to say for sure, but even if I had, I would not have given him the information, because why would I give that out to a stranger? I have something in my car for you. You should come out on your break and take it. I'll wait for you. Oh, I had no idea when I will be going on break. It could be hours. That is okay. You know what? I've got a better idea. I will get it for you and bring it to you right now. Now, I really did not know how to take the situation, so I notified my manager quickly about the interaction and made sure that he kept an eye out on him for me. Lo and behold, he comes right back 15 minutes later with a manila folder in his hands. The customer stands right at the end of my lane and watches me for over an hour, just standing there waiting for me. Not even small talk, no. He doesn't even break eye contact. He doesn't talk to anyone else. The manager has been watching him and finally pulls him aside and says that it's time for him to leave. But the customer then explains instantly that he has something for me and it's important. He then instructs my manager to give this to me and that it's very important to me and he must do it as soon as possible. My manager says yes, of course, and he then leaves. Mind you, my girlfriend is actually currently working in a separate department and is notified and she comes over. I will never forget what I see while I was still cashiering. My manager and girlfriend open up the folder and the colour from their faces just immediately drained. I see them shuffling through tons of papers until finally my girlfriend snatches a folder and rips it in two. My manager pulls me off the register and tells me that he had left. It turns out he had written hundreds of love poems to me and some for his deceased mother as well. It's just terrible what he was writing in there. This man had been obsessed with me. I felt sick to my stomach and wanted to immediately throw up. Later on, the police come and they ask me some questions about the incident and I give my statements and such. They eventually found him on our camera system from earlier that day and they had enough evidence to give me the option to file a restraining order on him, as well as legally ban him from entering the store. The police eventually contacted him and when they asked him to confirm what he had tried to give me, he instantly hung up after talking for some time with the cop. I haven't seen that man yet, thank God, but I know that I never plan on it. Now, all of this occurred when I was in my last half of my senior year in high school. I'm female and I was 18 then. I was taking a physics class that I was really into. I'm artistic and I'm really getting an arts related degree now. But at the time, I was just really enjoying the meshing of maths with getting to build things. So, I knew most of the people in the class I was in. I went to a relatively large high school, so there were still people coming that I hadn't interacted with at all. One of them was a guy that we'll just call Nate. Nate was in my business class as well, but again, we'd never spoken. Nate never really participated in the class too often. To be honest, I never really thought much about him. He looked like an average kid of a high school boy. Nothing weird or off. He usually just wore the same hoodie and same jeans, which is like camo in a sea of teenagers. He played games on his phone before class. Pretty typical stuff, I think. For one of our class projects, we were assigned into groups to build one of those Rube Goldberg machines. If you don't know what that is, those are the silly little machines that's supposed to be really overcomplicated and ridiculous. Like in cartoons where something falls off a shelf and creates a domino effect that drops a bowling ball onto someone's head. It's hard to explain, but they're really neat. Anyway, I'm going a bit off the rack. I was paired up with two casual friends of mine and Nate. After battling through everyone's schedule, Nate offers to come build the thing at his house. The machines take up the whole room, so we needed a lot of space. All we needed to do though, however, was just record it, doing some things on a camera and show our class later. I have social anxiety and I'm pretty introverted as a person on top of it. Right away, I was already a little nervous to go to this guy's house that I didn't know well. I did what a lot of people with social anxiety normally do. I overthink. I wanted my friends to show up with me so that I would not have to go there alone. I convinced my mum to pick up my friends on the way so we could go in together. I don't drive, which is another result of my anxiety. My planning almost worked. Last minute, both of them had something coming up though, and would be an hour late. Oh, great. So I ended up on this guy's doorstep alone. He opened the door and I just stood there and he stared at me for like 20 seconds before saying anything. I just assumed that he was nervous about having people over. I thought maybe he had anxiety too or was shy or something. I could empathise with that, so I sit there and brush it all off as social awkwardness. Quickly though, something felt weird. He told me his father and sisters were gone for the weekend and that he had the house to himself. The house had this really insane looming security system and speakers in every ceiling in the corner. He showed me to the basement. Apparently, we were going to be working down there. I just told myself that I was overanalyzing the situation and that it was going to be fine. Yes, I went into the basement straight after. So, for the next hour, I was trying to help him, and we were trying to start building this machine. I asked him if he had a specific supply we needed, and he gave me some really vague response and just sort of stared at me. Like, it's hard to describe, but it wasn't even like he was looking at me in the eyes, just staring me in a hole like I was a lamp or a picture or something. All the conversation was completely one-sided on my part. I asked him where his family went, but all he said was that he was just glad that they were gone and some weird remark about how he hated his sister. Basically, it was an hour of me standing awkwardly on the cement floor feeling cornered. I asked him for a tape, etc., and he'd make some comment about not being sure if we needed the tape and just kept staring, completely ignoring what I actually said. Eventually my friend showed up and it was like some switch was flipped in Nate's head. Suddenly, he was all casual and semi-helpful in working on the project. Our partners were confused by how little had actually gotten done in the hour we had been here. I didn't really know how to explain what had/hadn't actually happened to them since he was acting so different now. I think mostly it's because I second guess myself a lot. so I felt insecure in how creepy I found him. So about a week passes. We turn in our project, got a pretty good grade, and I'm relieved I am no longer going to be forced to interact with Nate. Wrong. The next few weeks felt pretty normal, then suddenly, Nate starts sitting directly beside me in both classes. The staring continues. Occasionally, he scoots his chair closer to mine. He doesn't really speak to me. He just sits at the table that we're at. It goes unnoticed by those around us. I try to brush it off mostly. I'd occasionally move away, try to send cues to that guy that I was uncomfortable. I assumed he had a crush and didn't know how to go about talking to me or something. Eventually, I got up and had the nerve when the closeness was so obvious. Not even I could second guess myself to that he was weird. I said with annoyance, "Can I have some space, please?" The guy was literally looming over me. He stared at me and he was almost startled for a second and moved over. I wish I told the teacher about it or something now. I thought I could deal with it and I'd be fine. The last unsettling thing that happened is that he started bringing cookies and stuff in a Ziploc bag to class. Like a single cookie in a single plastic bag. Just one, hand-baked. Saton cookie. Like he brought it just for me specifically. He'd offer it to me again the next day. I told him no and thank you every time. Maybe it was just me being paranoid, but I always knew that there was something off about him. I don't think they were drugged since they were in the middle of the class, but I just felt like it was off. The year ended and we had our senior class trip. They brought buses to take us to a theme park for the day. I was really excited, no thoughts of Nate. High school was over. I'd see him at graduation and that'd be it. I spent the day with a group of friends. Some of them had already graduated and come back for the meetup. We had a really good time. Close to the end of the day, Nate came up to me, casually asking what ride I was going on. A friend of mine just assumed that I know him and told him what ride that I was about to go on. He just sort of nodded and walked away. When I got off though, I didn't see him, thankfully. I didn't think about him for the rest of the trip. When we were leaving to reboard the bus, my phone started vibrating. It was an unknown number. "Where are you?" was all it said. I then asked who it was. "It's Nate." I realised he still had my number from the group project. "What do you mean? Where was I?" "My entire day was ruined because I spent it looking for you. I didn't get to enjoy the rides because of you." At this point, I was shocked and confused, then really annoyed. My best friend was sitting with me as this happened. This is not really a conversation that went on for more than a few minutes. He started swearing and accusing me of ditching him and ruining his day. He kept saying it was obvious that he was into me and that it was my fault he thought we were dating. My friend ended up taking my phone and telling the guy not to talk to me again, and that he was trying to emotionally manipulate me and told him to go away. I was really shaken up on the ride back. I never talked to Nate again, but the staring did continue at graduation. He circled me as we were lining up, but I think the amount of people around me put him off. I think what I found most unsettling was how undetectable he is. I could never tell what he was actually thinking. I know people probably have a lot more aggressive stalking experiences, but I still wonder how the thing with Nate started / what his intentions actually were. What was he thinking that hour in the basement? Now I need to start this story off by telling you that I live in a poor Eastern European country in a big city but in a bad neighbourhood. At least that's what I've been told. I've never actually encountered any creepy individuals that would want to do me any harm. Just your usual vandals and troublemakers, never anyone serious. I'm also still a teenager and live with my parents, but growing up in this environment, I would consider myself to be quite street smart. Feature that has always helped me whenever I was in trouble. It turned out to be very useful today. It's about 3 p.m. My dad left for ping pong practice and I knew that he'd be back by 8 p.m. He usually goes for a beer with his friends afterwards just to chill. And coincidentally, my older brother and my mum left to help out one of my friends clean up the place after a New Year's party. I should have come along, but I felt sick and decided that I should just stay in. In reality, I was hungover, but my mum doesn't know that. That was probably the luckiest I've ever been. You'll find out in a minute why. So all of my family decides to leave except for me. Naturally, I've been home alone before, so that doesn't really make me uneasy at all. But having been a long time reader of scary stories, I took much more precaution than I used to. For example, check to make sure the door is closed, the lights are off when not needed. The evening goes just like any other though. I'm rewatching some episodes of some TV programs I really like. Then, just behind my apartment complex, there's a very well-known supermarket on which I can always rely on whenever I'm in deep need of a snack, so that it's just a 5-minute walk away. I don't think anything of it. I decide to put my coat on and my flip-flops and I'm out. It's freezing cold outside. I can see the bright lights of the supermarket in the distance, but something was off. In front of the automatic doors there was a small robust figure. As I got closer I could distinguish his face. It was this man whose face I've seen before. I couldn't remember quite who it was, but I remember seeing him countless times roaming around the block of flats, but never actually thought anything of it. He was dressed poorly and was staying in front of the doors as if he was guarding them. I asked if the supermarket was still open and he pointed at a paper which was clipped near the schedule. It was closed at 6 p.m. due to the holiday season. It was now 6:20. I let out a sigh and wanted to return around to be back on my way home, but he told me in an alarmed voice that there was a very close boutique next to the supermarket. I told him I didn't need anything important and that I would come tomorrow, but he kept on insisting and saying it's a 2-minute walk away from there. And while staring at me in a weird manner, that was the first red flag, but I found a logical explanation in my mind, thinking that maybe he was just eager to help. Maybe, so I thought I'd give him some money. That sort of made sense in my mind, but I was still alert. So I walked past the boutique and took whatever I could find fastest, paid, wished the shop owner a happy new year and left in a hurry. As time passed I was getting more and more nervous for some reason. I guess it was just my gut telling me that something was off. What really made me switch was the fact that I had been gone for 5 minutes as I was passing the supermarket, and this guy who was usually roaming around my area was nowhere to be seen. At that point I started jogging towards my apartment, all the while trying to calm myself and imagine plausible explanations as to why this guy wasn't there anymore. I got to the bottom of the stairs of the front door and in the distance I noticed a tall dark figure entering the elevator, and at the same time, almost planned, the automatic light switched out. I desperately ran towards the interphone and clumsily got my keys out to open the door. As I ran to the elevator, it was still running. I live on the 7th floor. I could see it go up to the 3rd, then the 4th, then the 5th, then it stopped. And I let out a big sigh of relief. But I was still skeptical, so I took the stairs. As I was walking up the stairs, almost laughing, I noticed that above me the lights were on within the 6th floor. That was a bit curious, but I kept on walking. Suddenly, I saw the light on the 7th floor turned on and I stopped. Looked above and hoped that whoever it was would go on to the 8th floor. A minute passed and it felt like hours and the light on the 7th floor was still on. I decided to take action, so I ran all the way up to the floor and I saw something that almost made me pass out. The tall dark figure was kneeling at my doorknob, trying to, what I presume was, lockpick my door. In these kind of situations, I rarely get angry. I just want whatever is going on to stop, so from afar, I shouted out a weak, "Hey!" And the guy in an instant turns around and stands up. I see him for a split second and he looks absolutely terrifying. Long black trench coat, a hat and leather gloves. He smiles at me and reveals his yellow unkept teeth. He keeps smiling at me. Do you know that stomach churning feeling when you stumble upon something that is scarily out of the world and wrong, that you can't just look at it, but you know you want to? That was it, amplified by like 1,000. I was shaking and to my surprise, the man took off running. Before he reached the stairs, he mumbled, "Sorry," and got away. I was still in shock and couldn't follow him or call the police, or even move for that matter. I easily got to the door of my apartment and noticed that there was a pin stuck in the door where he had obviously been trying to open it. Yep, he was definitely trying to get into my house. Who knows what he wanted? My parents wouldn't be back for about 2 more hours and I'm still not sure if I should tell them or even call the cops. Thinking of this in retrospective, I think this tall man and the man in the front of the supermarket may have conducted a plan. It would have been all the more convenient for him to catch me off guard like that. Either way, that is one scary thought. One thing is for certain, I will be keeping a bat in my room from now on. So much for New Year's resolutions. So this following story happened in 2007 in May, and for reference, I'm female, was 20 at the time and weighed about 115 pounds, so overpowering me was extremely easy. I live in a city in Northern Ireland, and at the time I was best friends with my ex-boyfriend. My ex-boyfriend's cousin's band decided to play a small gig way out in the countryside, so we had to drive for about an hour or more to get to the location. We arrived and it was literally a field amongst fields, smack back in the middle of nowhere. Apparently, one of the members of the band knew the owner of this field and apparently we had permission to be there. I never checked, but I just thought whatever. There were several cars already there when we arrived. We had packed the car full of tents, sleeping bags and tons of alcohol. The plan was to watch the band, blast some tunes, then have a bit of a party and spend the night in the field in our tents. The way the field was set out was kind of in the shape of an L. All the tents were set up around the corner and the band had set up a generator across the field on one side from the other. Then, besides where the tents were, there was a hole in a bush to the other field. We went through it to go to the toilet, so we had some privacy from everyone. There was roughly around 30 or 40 people in the field. The band started playing, we started drinking and generally having a good time. Anytime I needed to pee, I had to go with my ex's sister or a friend, as it was a good few minutes walk to the field across from ours, and none of us wanted to go alone, even though we were in the middle of nowhere. I was sharing a tent with my ex for the night. At about 3 AM, I decided I had enough and wanted to go back to sleep. I told him I was going, and made my journey across the field to the tents. As I got in the tent and pulled down the zipper, I felt someone tugging at me and assumed it was my ex. until I heard an unfamiliar voice say, "Let me in." Quite aggressively, I yelled out, "Who are you?" And he said, "I know you're alone in there, and you can't hold the zipper down forever. Let me in." Over the next minute or so, I was gripped onto the zipper of the tent and holding both sides of the fabric together, trying to prevent this guy from getting into my tent. And even a couple of times he managed to get the zipper down, but I managed to get it back to where it was for the life of me. I have no idea how I managed to do this. The whole time we were struggling against each other over the zipper, he kept saying things like, "I'm going to eventually get in. It's going to be worse for you if you don't let me in." I was absolutely petrified. Then I heard my ex-boyfriend's booming voice shout out, "What are you doing at that tent?" Then I heard a smack and a thud and my ex called to ask me if I was okay. My ex saw what was happening, punched the guy and he fell. He had watched me walk to the tents and watched this dude follow me behind, assuming he was going to the loo, but he kept watching just to make sure. When he saw him turn towards the tent, he then come over to make sure that I was okay. Thank God he did. Anyway, a huge fight broke out and then one of the creepy guy's friends ended up hitting him too. Turns out, he was known for this kind of creepy behaviour and he'd been in some trouble with the law for stuff like this in the past. And my ex's cousin had said that he was staying over at her house with her brother one night and she woke up to find him standing over her bed watching her sleep. I don't really know what his intentions were. Had he managed to fight his way into the tent that night, no one would have heard anything because of the music where it was so loud, but thank goodness my ex still cared enough about me to keep an eye on me as I made my way back to the tent that night. This happened to me when I was 8 or 9. My house was set up weird. I'll explain. The main entrance was just feet from my door. We had a hallway that had a door to my sister's room, my parents' and mine. The bathroom was across the hall, way away from mine. I shared the room with my younger brother, who was a sound sleeper. I, on the other hand, was not a sound sleeper. We both had a closet which had a couple of metal bars and some clothes that hang on to them. So that night my parents were out of town. My aunt come over to watch us for the weekend. She let us stay up because it was the summer. We went to bed and we closed the closet door. My brother and I were always afraid to fall asleep when it was open. So I fell asleep at around 7 o'clock and I woke up an hour later because I had a sudden urge to pee. So I quietly walked to the bathroom. I look in the hallway and hear my aunt snoring on the couch. I do my business and walk back to the room. I jump over my stuffed animal and keep my blankets off. Just as I do that, I see a dark figure standing in the open closet. I lay there froze in fear. I saw it move and I wanted to shout out for my aunt, but I can't even scream. I eventually built up the courage to though. It was a blood-curdling scream and that you can only do in true fear. The figure then darts to the window. I hear and see the glass break. My aunt rushes in and opens the door and turns on the lights. She then asks me what was wrong, sweetie, and I point at the window. I then say something along the lines of, "A man in the closet, he just come out, he broke through the window." She then calls the cops and they showed up minutes later because we were so close to the station. She tells all of them what happened and they searched the woods behind our house. Years later, I see on the news that a man snuck into a house and got in the closet. He then killed a 9-year-old child. I am lucky I screamed, otherwise I would have had the same fate as that girl. He later on escaped the cops when that he was being transported from one prison to another. Since then I put on muscle and always carry a gun. I won't let him escape again. When I was 16, this story happened, and it's one that I'm sure is never gonna leave me. I was with my two friends, Ben and John, at the time. We were about to go and catch a bus to come play soccer, kind of close to where we lived. None of our parents were available, so it's not like we could just get a lift down there. Where we live, we're surrounded by lots of fields and a small barn. We never really think too much of these places because, well, there's nothing there. I walked up to their houses and we all go to the bus stop together. As we're there, we realise that we're at least half an hour away from the bus. This really annoyed us, but we didn't have a choice because, like I said, there was no other way we're going to be able to get a lift down there. So we just started all talking amongst ourselves. You know, it was just general stuff, mostly about school actually, and what our favourite soccer teams were. It got really interesting actually, and we kind of got lost in our own world. Now, at this time I think it's important to mention, it wasn't dark, but it was beginning to get so. It was one of them very cold winter months. We did have a lot of fog then, and that was another reason it probably wasn't a good idea to get a lift. Where it was getting dark and there was nothing to stop the fog forming, sometimes we would get really bad fog. This day was no exception, except it was slightly lighter than normal, but only just forming. Then I raised the idea, do any of you guys want to go and maybe just, I don't know, walk out in it, have some fun? The bus is gonna come in like 10 minutes, but we'll be good, right? My friends both agreed and we all walked out towards the field together. We made sure that we didn't go too far away from the bus stop, however, as we always knew that we'd be able to see it coming from a long way away, so we wouldn't have a problem just running to it. One thing that was weird to note was that there were no other cars around. Now the bus stop was a bit away from our houses, but I didn't realise it at the time, but there were no people. I don't know, it was just really odd, and it seemed to be getting dark far too quick. As we were there, we saw some normal things, you know, just like a scarecrow and whatnot, but nothing else. We didn't pay too much attention to what was going on around us. We just thought it was funny because if one of us walked too far, we would just disappear. We were all calling each other names and that from in the fog because we just thought it was so funny. Just as we were doing that, one of my friends called out. This time he sounded different though. He almost sounded scared. I didn't hear exactly what he said. I didn't know if it was a fog, but I just found it really hard to listen to what he was saying. He was saying something about, "Quick, there's someone coming." Now I don't know why, but at this exact moment, all of us seemed to be filled with fear. It's hard to describe because we didn't have this feeling a second ago. I laid low, I couldn't see what the other two were doing. And just as I was laying to the ground, I realised how cold it was. And then, I was just silent. I was almost sure that I could start to hear the same thing too. It sounded like somebody whistling. The only thing that didn't make sense though, however, was when I stopped to try and locate it, I just couldn't. Again, I put this down to the fog distorting it, but I don't know, it just didn't make sense. It was almost like the whistling was coming from two sides even. Maybe there's more of them. Oh no, maybe that's a farmer and he doesn't want us here, I whispered. I didn't get a reply though. The whistling stopped abruptly. Oh god, they found me, I thought. I decided the best thing to do would be just to lay low still. And just like that, the whistling started again. This time it sounded more distant. As I was laying there, I got the shock of my life. It was the loudest boom I'd ever heard. I know it was lightning, but imagine laying down on the floor, not being able to see around you, not even thinking it had started raining, scared, trying to hide from somebody. This really unsettled me and I didn't know what to do now. I started calling out for my friend's name, but I didn't get a reply. God, I've got to get out of here, I thought. But the whistling come on again. That mixed with the rain and the thunder, it was just so unsettling to me. And boy, had it got dark. It was almost like time was going too quick around me. It's an experience that I've never had since. I decided that it was about time I at least stood up to some degree. I began crouching now and looking to see if I could see my friends. I kept whispering their names. Guys, any of you, where are you? I figured that I was in fact on my own, but I didn't know who this was around me or what it was whistling. I thought that the rainfall and the distortion from the fog would give me just enough time and cover to be able to get out of there. So I began jogging. Only problem was I couldn't see where I was going. I jogged for a good 2 minutes and then stopped again. I just waited in silence. Then I heard it again. This time it put fear into me that I've never felt before. It was that same whistling, but it was almost like it was on top of me. I thought I knew where it was coming from and I was almost too scared to look. I looked up and could just about see the scarecrow off in the distance. I decided that this would be my only chance to get out of here, and I realised how much danger I was in. So I thought I knew roughly where I was going and I began running. As I did, my head got really dizzy and I felt disorientated. I swear, because when I looked back, there was something moving. It was a person whistling. I knew it was, but it was in the exact same place as that scarecrow. This doesn't make any sense. This time, it seemed as if it was moving directly towards me. I began sprinting as fast as I could, almost slipping on the muddy fields. I was so desperate to shout out my friends' names, but I was just so scared I couldn't make noise. I just kept on running. Now I can run pretty quick anyway, so I really deployed this now. I started to get out of breath and stopped again. I looked back and I couldn't see anything, so I decided to keep on walking. As I did, I realised roughly where I was. It wasn't where I thought I was initially. I was pretty sure that I knew where the bus stop was now, so I proceeded towards it, and to my prevail, thank God, I wasn't even looking at the ground at the time, but I heard the pavement below my feet and then the road. And as I did, I could see the familiar faces of my two friends. Guys, where were you? I was looking all over for you two. Yeah, we thought it'd be funny if we ran away and just gone to the bus stop and left you there. But I swear there was one of you with me. They both looked at each other, almost more confused at what I had said to them than they'd ever been before, or anything else I'd said to me prior. That doesn't make sense. We both come together. Who is that guy you were with? What guy? What, the one whistling? Yeah, the one we're running from. You know, next to the scarecrow? And they both looked at me and said, we weren't with you in that field for the whole time apart from when we ran here. I said, but surely you must have. Look, that's the scarecrow. What? Who's that? I saw both of their faces turn white. They said to me, that's not the field with the scarecrow, that is. And we both looked back, and we could see the field that actually had the scarecrow in it. We turned back to look at whatever this thing was in the fog. The fog was getting heavier. The rain was still going. It was getting darker and darker. None of us wanted to get the bus at that point. And we knew then that something was off. And then just as I went to say something, it started again. That whistling. And I can tell you, it still disturbs me and gives me nightmares to this day. And needless to say that we all booked it to get home and just out of there and out of that horrible situation. Now looking back on it, it could very easily have been just somebody playing tricks on us, but there's one part in this that doesn't make any sense. We know for a fact that nobody else was around us just before the fog got too bad. We could see clear as day and there was no one. It wouldn't have even been physically possible for somebody to run from just out of our range and meet us there. I like to think that it was just a person playing tricks on me, but to be honest with you, as hard as it is to believe, I don't know what to think now. Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed these type videos I'm doing. I'm going to be doing a lot more, and sorry I didn't get around to doing the update video. I did have some problems where I recorded it and it just wouldn't save properly, but I'll probably do that sometime later today or tomorrow, so that should be out soon. You have a lot of collabs to look forward to now because I've got quite a few, so I'm going to be featuring lots of good narrators soon. And I just wanted to say thank you all, and I really appreciate each and every one of you. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a lot more videos like this soon, so please subscribe if you already haven't, if you want to keep updated with it. And if this video gets lots of likes, I'll make 3 teas and put it on Twitter. Yeah. I'm crazy now. Thank you everyone, and have a nice day.